Welcome to Rauta's retrospective videos. This time, once again, we go to Finland, and this time with a band called Sargeist. Now, a lot of you probably know the band already, and as such, you know the basics, but nonetheless, it's worth taking a look through this whole discography, because this has always been more or less a side project of Shatrauk, mostly, obviously, known from his main band, Horna. Now, the term main band, side project, and all that stuff sometimes get audience and even the band members confused. There are lots of people who are like wavering their things like, no, this is not a side project. And then you're like, how many main bands you can be? I mean, how many main wives you can have? Wouldn't be more the case like this. One main band and the rest are on the side. But no, sometimes bands tend to have more than one heads, so to speak. So let's give them the right to think that way, even if the others, such as we as the audience, consider them side projects. But obviously, Sargeist was more than Mr. Shatrauk doing his own music. That is, technically speaking, we could go to early years of Sargeist and make this claim. Now, going to Metal Archives for a backdrop so you don't just have to see my face, is that technically speaking, back in the days, it was more like, nowadays kids would understand what I mean here, Horna X Beheksen, or Beheksen. The thing here is, it mostly consisted quite early on, three guys, Horns and Hoth Thorog, both from Beheksen, and their predecessor, Lords of the Left Hand. So as you can see, 2002, 2016, it was these two guys who were in the band, as well as obviously Shatrauk, who started the band already in the very late 90s. However, there wasn't anything going on in terms of recordings until 2001. So it's safe to say that, while technically speaking, Sargeist counts as a 1990s band, and it will be as such part of my Finnish black metal history series, technically speaking, Sargeist is still a 2000s band. And early on, while these guys joined as 2002 and onwards, well, they made the very, very major part of the whole career. If you now take a look at this history of about 25 years, and you see the discography here, which is quite vast, considering that it's been more or less side project. It only got out 5 albums. I'm saying only 5, considering 25 years. But then again, there are lots of splits and EP and whatever. So they take quite a bit of the whole discography if you go listing. But like I said, if you narrow it down to main listings, you have 5 albums. And 4 of them were done with the Beheksen duo, Horns and Hoth Thorog. So these 4 albums basically made what Sargeist is mostly known for. Obviously, Unbound is a good release nonetheless, but still, if you take a big look, throughout 25 years, and about 14 of those years were done with those 2 guys. So that's the story. But before even those 2, there were some members which are briefly mentioned here on Metal Archives as well. But their, time in the band wasn't that much of a big deal, at least in the whole big picture. So maybe they didn't have that much of a thing. One thing is worth noting is that Sargeist has gone through 3 different eras or phases. And the first one is this with the Beheksen guys. The second one was with these 3 different guys who are now gone, or maybe we could talk about 4 guys. And one of them is Mr. Abysmal and Gruft and Profundus. These guys have different names in different bands, so it can get quite a bit confusing. But let's call them as they are here listed on Metal Archives. So, for example, Gruft is mostly known for his works in Line Ruins, Perdition Winds, and in a way, Desolate Shrine. A multi-talent guy, but in Sargeist he was focusing on the drums. Then again, Profundus, who is also known as Hellwind, has quite a bit of different band, and maybe mostly he's known for his work for, I don't know, back in the days. This is just me thinking of Sacrilegious Impalement and In Creation's Dawn. But again, he was part of the Crescent, which is an Enochian Crescent spin-off in a way, and he played also his own band, Famulus Ab Satanas, which is still active. and Desolate Shrine later on, and also Hellwind Return from White Death. So a lot of different bands, more or less, being part-time or long-time member. So Hellwind, or Profundus, played the vocals in the band for quite a few years, but only one album after Behexen guys. And then we have finally Abysmal, who is known for also some other black metal bands from Finland. So all these guys are more or less, long-time veterans in the scene and being, playing death metal, black metal, what have you. So that was the second era. And now we have this current era where Shatterow is back on vocals, which he started already when he was doing the band on his own, the late 90s. Then we also have Spellgoth from Horna, so Shatterow's band member from Horna, and of course Spellgoth has quite a few other bands too, including Trollheim's and Chamber of Unlight and Nightchild Trapus, but mostly known as Horna vocalist these days. So basically Shatterow is, having a usual band member with his, and then we have Nur Shiach from few bands and also taking part here, so this is a little bit of international lineup band now. And then VJ is also band member of big bands like Nightbringer, Adestuo, and so forth. So nowadays it's kind of a international lineup, but because Shatterow is the main boss, El Jefe of the band, that's how it goes. But that's about these eras. Let's start talking about how Sargeist music, evolved throughout the years and what it's to begin with. If we talk about the music, then let's talk a little bit of the covers and lyrics and so forth once we go on. So, like most bands back in the days, Sargeist did the right thing and started with demo. So there was this Nokmar thing, and Tyranny returned already quite early on. And to be honest, if you haven't listened to them, if you haven't heard them, you're not missing out too much. Much like, a lot of bands back in the early days, much like Horna, for example, the early steps are kind of a clumsy, kind of a unpolished, unfinished even to a certain degree. I mean, worth a listen if you want to go through the whole discography, obviously. But apart from that, you can pretty much skip them and move on to the either first album or just start with the interesting split with Merrimack from 2002. It's pretty interesting that before doing a full album or their MCD of their own, they had split before that, because it's not a really typical start. But I guess this is kind of to showcase that this French connection with, Finland and people from Horna and all that stuff was already established. Obviously, French scene is very, very important, and there are lots of bands from Les Légions Noires or LLN. And these guys had the connection going on with guys from Lappeenranta. And Shatterow is just one of them guys. Obviously, Satan Warmaster had his own French connections and so forth. So sometimes not the most obvious things, but these are more coming to, obvious when you go through not only Sargeist discography, but also Horna, because there's another French connection going on. So in a sense, these kind of splits are not that surprising. But like I said, it's not your typical way to start a career. Already pretty good. What really, in my opinion, started the engine, obviously, was the album Satanic Black Devotion from 2003. Now, this is almost 10 years later than when Horna was, founded, and a few years when Horna's debut was founded. So by the time of this came out, already the Behexen guys and Horna guys, they were quite experienced. So it comes no surprise that this songwriting and, production, even quite raw, is, not polished, but, very thought of. Meaning it sounds like a very, very strong start for a new band. But if it wasn't for these veteran guys, I don't think it would have sounded so good, and the songwriting was so, consistent, good quality and all. So, like I said here, lineup is made of Behexen guys and Shatterow. So, in a way, 1/3 of Horna and 2/3 of Behexen, but then again, because Shatterow's bands, maybe 50-50 is more closer to describing that. In my opinion, this is probably the best Sargeist album of all times, even if the whole discography is very, very consistent. There are no major drop downs or anything. But this is the kind of album that set the Sargeist tone in place in a way. And some of the best songs are here, like well, Satanic Black Devotion. It's catchy, it's dark, it's kind of evil sounding, and it's really, in my opinion, one song, if you could pick from whole Sargeist discography, it's that one. Because all the bands in the world have one or few songs that are really the ones that you kind of go with. I mean, even if we're talking about big bands like Metallica's or, I don't know, Cannibal Corpse's, Dimmu Borgir's, everybody has their own Enter Sandmans or early songs, or in like Dimmu's case, you know, the Morning Palaces and whatnot. So in a sense, Satanic Black Devotion serves the same purpose. And this goes their very grim and stripped down cover to photo, skull, black gloves. And it also like kind of sets the, you know, the idea here. The album name is badass. It's kind of evil sounding. And then we accompany with the cover with the photo and skull. I mean, there's no turning back at this point. Lyrically, obviously, these are going through different satanic topics. Some are more about like Satanism, obviously. Some are more kind of, I would say, vampiric themes in a way. And then there are these themes which are borderline, you know, sadness, depression, and all that stuff. Not so much aggression, really, like a lot of other bands out there. I mean, Horna would be seen more aggressive, whereas this is more about darkness and Satan and all. But some of them are quite vague, meaning that it's hard to really say, like, what are you trying to say, except that, you know, tell that you have these misanthropic things. You're not exactly in love with humanity, and you have these certain nihilistic takes. But then again, nihilism and Satan, they tend to be a little bit in contradiction, because either you have no values at all, like nihilism, or then you have this devotion to Satan and whatnot, and in my opinion, there's a contradiction. So when Metal Archives lists these themes, Satanism, death, depression, misanthropy, nihilism, evil, darkness, I would maybe question that nihilism a little bit. But Satanism, depression, death, misanthropy, yeah, sure. And some of these themes are quite fantasy-inspired, in my opinion, because some of them are talking about like kind of like between the lines, like I'm a vampire, or want to be a vampire, hundreds of years old and all that stuff. Which means, like, unless you literally believe in that's possible, it's kind of a fantasy thing, really. I mean, most of us anyway. Now, after the debut album, the band was really active doing splits. So 3 different splits in 2004. These are not mandatory to listen. They are obviously good successors to the first album and the first split. But once again, something that I would consider fans-only material. While they are pretty good in all, I mean, can't really bitch about them, they are not really the kind of stuff that you would be worried if you missed them. Because, in my opinion, bands such as this is mostly carried by the albums. And those splits between are more like dedication about the scene, about the camaraderie, and also, you know, how to say, filling the gaps in a way. Might sound a little bit harsh to say that, but in my opinion, it's really where the band really kind of stands on. It's these albums. So 2005, Disciple of the High Nose Path, a good successor to the debut album, and I would say roughly as good as that. However, this doesn't really have the, I would say, the hit songs like Black Metal Murder or Satanic Black Devotion. But apart from that, very, very solid and a good successor to the debut album. And with such, songs on this album, I would say this is roughly as good as the debut album. If it was only like a gun pointing at my head, like choose one, then I would go Satanic Black Devotion. But any other day, I would say, I don't care. Both are equally good. And in a way, this continues with the same themes and lyrics, as well as covers, like once again, a photo, clearly anti-Christian corpse paints and all. So yeah, this is giving you, with the name and with the cover, a feeling like this is a real deal. This is satanic black metal, not some political take or some vague atmospheric nature inspired thing. Satanism in its very core. And the lyrics, once again, reflect that with the given topics we mentioned. Now, in terms of lyrics, for this video, I read the full album lyrics, so if there are some interesting details and splits, I wouldn't know. Just, disclaimer way to put it. Then was a longer break between their main albums. If these early years were like 2002 to 2005 or even 2006, very, very quickly, some kind of a release being dropped every year. Here it is a bigger gap. 5 years between the main albums and even a couple of years between the EPs, splits. Let the Devil In. This comes with a beautiful cover. It has this hooded monk or priest with the cross, but obviously the album is suggesting this is not Jesus Christ you're letting in, but something else. And once again, this is then again portrayed with the lyrics. These are clearly continuing the same topics as before, meaning it's a certain kind of a devilry or Satanism, the fantasy themes related to fantasy, vampires and all, and also death, darkness, evil. The kind of topics keep going here. There are a lot of metaphors, or at least vague things. So you might be interpreting them different ways than other people like me. Like certain people might be like, okay, this is about beliefs, and some might say like, no, this is metaphor to something else. They are not really chewed down to pieces like, hey, this is very obvious what these guys are saying. And as such, it totally depends on the given person how much you're gonna get out of them. But once again, nothing has really changed here. And the same can be said about the fourth album 4 years later, after a couple of smaller releases, Feeding the Crawling Shadows. And here, once again, the original style kind of goes on. You have the robes, inverted cross, corpse paints, evil-looking creature. So these are keeping it to the very, very original ideas with the style. And once again, similar things here in lyrics. Once again, you might notice names like Unto the Temple, or with the devil in, let the devil in. Kind of a same kind of a thing, a spell to awaken the temple. So you will see these things like temples or undeads or black coffins, by the way, coffin spirits, which the name seems to be suggesting. You will see certain themes that are kind of repeated through the years. So at least there is consistency, but you also might saying like they are tapping into the very same veins all over again. Whether or not that is a good thing, it's obviously up to the given listener. But now I would say Satanic Black Devotion and Disciple of the Highness Path are somewhat better than the two albums after that. While said that, I mean, I would give them all 4 stars. It's not like the difference is big. But something was a little bit on decline here. Now, and after this one, the Feeding the Crawling Shadows being the last album for the Behection duo, things were changing. And then there was Unbound 2018, now with a little bit different lineup, which you can see here. Suddenly it was 5 guys instead of 2, and Behexen was no more in that stuff. I don't know if it's coincidence, but also the graphical style for the album was something different. Now it was black and white drawing, and here you can see this kind of a spirit creature coming from a grave or something, rising up. Very atmospheric, but also it's all of a sudden like, hey, let's go back to the 90s to do a demo cover, simplistic and all. Quite nice, but also feels more like, tracking back versus the early years. And here you have a little bit different set of lyrics, but not that different in a way. I think the very Sargeist nature, the very core, is still very much intact here, but it's also somewhat different. If you read the lyrics, you will most likely notice that certain themes are now in the past and things are changing. These are more vague, in my opinion, rather than the early lyrics, which are more obvious about Satan and evil and darkness, and also those coffin spirits, vampires, and what have you. What is worth mentioning, even though it's not a full album, is also Death Veneration, coming with the same lineup as the Unbound. And this was, if I remember correctly, some leftover tracks from Unbound. Maybe this is even better than Unbound, but I don't know. They're roughly the same. The style is so much the same, and even though there's a nearly different lineup, still the Sargeist, spirit, the core is still the same. But now 2018 and so forth, new albums out. I was told for this video that 2025 should mark the beginning of the new era, meaning there's a new album coming out with the new lineup and all. But one thing happened before that, and this is somewhere listed as full album because it is, technically speaking, that, but it's a split with Serpent Noir, Transcendental Black Magic. And this is very different in terms of style, cover, but also music. To be honest, I didn't like the Serpent Noir part, but it's just because it's way too different. It's too kind of a soft, too much, clean vocals, and too different. I mean, for me, it's a kind of an entry-level, soft kind of a black metal, which is definitely not my kind. No offense to Serpent Noir guys, but this is not the stuff that would, get my, like, hey, what's that? I want to check it out. Sargeist part is way better, but even this is not nearly as good as the stuff earlier on, which makes me think if this is more like a let's use some leftovers for a split and get something out. So if I would draw some kind of a image out of this, like a graph, like where this is going, I would say it's slowly going decline. Hopefully I'm wrong and this Transcendental Black Magic is not the kind of a milestone to look at. Because if I was, putting these on a fucking Excel sheet and making the graph, it would just show this decline, and while there is no major drop, this is a drop from Death Veneration and Unbound. And I don't know, will be interesting to see where the band goes. All in all, however, I would say these 5 different studio albums, the ones that make the very pentagram core of the whole band, are very solid, and in my opinion, and not everybody's gonna like what I was about to say, but in my opinion, Sargeist is better than Horna on average. There's just something, in my opinion, more evil and in a way catchy, while more darkness involved with the Sargeist stuff, whereas Horna is more hit and miss. I mean, especially the early years. Horna has picked up the pace and, gotten better over the years. But especially the early years, Sargeist is totally winning. And sometimes making me think if Shadowrogue is actually putting better riffs in the Sargeist stuff. Is Horna more like a training ground and you pick up the best pieces? Or was it just because of a different lineup? This is something that we cannot say for sure, for certainty, because only Shadowrogue knows this. And obviously these are matters of taste too. Some might think Horna style is way better because it's just different than Sargeist. Then again, a lot of these riffs from Horna and Sargeist, in my opinion, are also kind of interchangeable, meaning that you could use a lot of Horna stuff in Sargeist and nobody would bat an eye, or vice versa. So there is that. Now, in terms of Beheksen, then there gets another comparison. I'm still yet to decide, but I would say in general, I'm a little bit more on Beheksen's side than on Sargeist side if I got to choose only one band. But interesting band nonetheless, given that it's always playing this kind of all-star lineup and always a side project versus the main bands. Either whether we are talking about the Beheksen side or Horna side, Sargeist has been more or less in the middle as kind of a spin-off of both bands. As far as I can tell, there is no official bad blood spilled between different members because of these different eras for the band. But I don't know, the official statement is that some people don't want to do the gig so much, whereas some people want to, and this has put people in different directions. But let's be honest about it, there is more than that. However, it goes beyond the scope of this video because we're not looking for drama, we're talking about the music and the changes of the lineup and the covers and all. And since now you know a little bit more of that, maybe tune in for the old interview we did a few years ago during the COVID years with Sargeist guys back then. Now, it is a little bit of outdated now because of the lineup changes and all, but should still give you a little bit more insight into the band's world than just this video alone. Now, obviously, if there's a one homework I can give to you is go through all these 5 full albums by Sargeist, and if those make you a fan, check out the splits. While the albums are relatively easy to find on your favorite streaming services, you might have to use YouTube and official channels for those splits in order to listen to them. Some of them are definitely worth your time, some might not be. But give it a go, obviously you decide whatever fits your taste and all. I'm just here to give you a few pointers and mention my own favorites And that's pretty much of it. Now off you go, enjoy some Finnish black metal and have a great 2025.